So while she's loading, I'll introduce myself. I'm Aart Kohn, and my academic training is I'm a neuroscientist, and I do research into how the brain processes information and saves information, transfers it, and we do a variety of different projects. The thing closest to my heart is a project that we will talk about some in here, which is I work with the Centers for Disease Control on HIV prevention in Southern Africa. You may know that in Zimbabwe, which is my specialty, 42% of our people have HIV. All of them will be dead in 5 years. The order of magnitude is unbelievable and tragic, and it's a horrible thing. And we are tasked with the challenge of trying to use our tools of training to change behavior. Please come on in. There's plenty of seats. There's no reason. If you want to stand, that's great, but I mean, just come on in and sit where you want. In that light, I want to start by asking a question. What's the goal of training? Change. I just heard that. It's so nice to hear that. For me, at the end of the day, learning without behavior change is empty. And we can give a person a course on leadership. And you know, when they're all done, they can answer A, B, C about consensus leadership. They have all the knowledge they need, and they still lead the same poor way they did before. Or they know all about the compliance rules, but they don't follow any of them. The only thing that matters in training is effective transfer. And what I want to talk about is how can, I should caveat this. I am not the person advertised in the book. I should have said that. That's not me. He is canceled, so I'm the understudy with my big break, and I'm hoping that I can pass the audition. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to be part of Training 14. You may have seen I'm part of the partnering with Training 14. If you saw the keynote this morning, I was wearing the same shirt, and it's been a long day. But it's a real privilege, and I want to try to tell you some of the things that we're doing, and I am happy to I have something of an expertise in the area that your original speaker was going to talk about. So if you have some questions, I can probably at least begin to make an intelligent attempt to answer some of those questions. We're going to go in a slightly different direction for this presentation, and what I want to focus on is what I could call after training. And for some of you who were there this morning, we spend $60 billion a year training our employees. $60 billion, and we know the precipitous loss of information that happens over time. We lose 70% of the knowledge, 70% of the stuff that you hear in this room today. We're back. 50% of the stuff you hear in this room today you will forget within an hour. 70% of what you hear in here will be forgotten in 24 hours. 90% of what you hear in here will be lost in a week. And there are many, many types of training. You guys do live, face-to-face, you do e-learning and webinars, but all things have one thing in common, and that's this, the forgetting curve. This forgetting curve was first described by Hermann Ebbinghaus. Hermann Ebbinghaus was a German psychologist, a memory expert. 1895, he drew that graph. And it illustrates the precision. By the way, all of his research used one subject, himself. And it's some of the research that has stood up best in all of neuroscience and psychology. So you can see the shape of the curve, the precipitous loss of memory. And I would argue that this forgetting curve explains why learning, it's at least one of the explanations why learning fails to transfer to the workplace. We did all these training sessions, but they're not changing their behavior. Why? Well, at least an important part of that answer is they forgot. And we can blame them for not remembering more, but it is in the nature of the organism that memory is purged. And we're going to take a look at that, and we're going to go into some detail about best ways to increase retention. Here's Trainer's Warehouse. Here's an option for us. Improve retention and encourage behavior change, yet get them a squishy ball. And it's discouraging. And all this stuff about adult learning, you give them a bloody squishy ball. That doesn't work. And we got it. This is where we go. And if this were, we'll be doing I think it's a 2.5 or something, at 12:15 on Wednesday. I hope to do a good job for you, and I'm committed to it. This is kind of last minute filling in substitute. The one on Wednesday afternoon is fairly hardcore neuroanatomy. And we will work in there, and I will teach you only the neuroanatomy you need to know in order to become a better teacher. There's a billion things, most of which I don't know about the brain, right? But there are some things which, if you know how they operate, you will become a better teacher. And that's what the Wednesday 12:15 presentation is all about. It just seems to me, guys, that, I can't get these, do they separate? This is my prop. If you're going to build a chair, you need to know the ergonomics of the user. If you're going to build a good chair, you study the shape of people's butts. You look at the flexibility of the spinal cord. You work on the ergonomics of the human being, and then you design your chair to be compatible with the ergonomics of the physiology, right? No one would think to design a chair without studying first the way the human body works. Doesn't the same logic appear to apply to the mind? If you're going to create learning, and if you want to induce behavior change, doesn't it make sense to come to a fundamentally better understanding of the nature of the way the brain works? Our brain is capable of collecting and retaining tremendous amounts of information. Tremendous. You can remember the name of the street that you grew up on. You can remember the look of your first boyfriend or girlfriend, what they look like. You can put it into mind. It's there. Terrific amounts of information are available to you. And the forgetting curve's causing us to learn precipitous amounts. How do I get it so that the challenge before us is, given that the brain is capable of so much and is giving us so little in terms of training, what is it that we can do? How can we study the brain so we can have the ergonomics of the brain so we can teach more effectively to it? That, at the end of the day, is what we're talking about. Right now, this particular session is going to focus on after training. What can we do in the days and the weeks after training to maximize long-term retention? That's this mission. After this one, on Wednesday, we'll talk more broadly about all kinds of tricks. I share at least just one. I teach this. This is one of the slides I use on one of the first days of class when I teach neuroanatomy. We teach what the thalamus, which is the sensory relay station. We teach about the cerebellum, which is coordinated movement. What's the hypothalamus do? What does the hypothalamus do? Nobody knows. Controls. It's the 4 F's of human behavior: fighting, feeding, fleeing, mating. And if you understand those 4 F's, you're better than my undergraduates, okay? My students are slower than that. Teaching is an aerobic sport, and we bust our butt to find mnemonics, ways to connect with the brain so that the brain is more likely to capture it, encode it, and bring it back. And that's the name of the game for me here in this domain. All right, forward. 3 keys to understanding memory. It's biological, it is adaptive, and you use it or lose it. And I'm telling you, these 3 themes, if you keep these 3 themes in mind, you will be very much better equipped for understanding the best ways to deal with teaching and learning in your environment. First, the concept that memory is biological. In some ways, is self-evident. In other ways, it's utterly profound. Remember that picture you had of your first boyfriend or girlfriend? Or your ability to remember the street you grew up on? Or what your hopes are for next year? The image you may have of your automobile. All of that, every one of those, is stored in the brain. It is represented somehow in an intricate network of neurons and axons and synaptic gaps. It has to be. There's nothing else. So every single thing, every memory and aspiration and dream that you have must be encoded in the brain. And as we begin to dissect it and see the way the brain stores that information, we can exploit it and leverage it. So if our first point is that memory is biological, and this is a bit of a reiteration to the keynote earlier today, you may notice the same slide. Forgetting is also adaptive. Right now, you have enormous amounts of information flooding into your brain. Enormous amounts of information. For example, your left ankle is currently sending neural information to an area of your brain right about there. Your left ankle is sending it to the right side, right about there. Is it, guys? You're also getting information about the last time you inhaled. When did you inhale recently? Pay attention to that. Have you blinked? Pay attention to your, okay, that information's going to your brain. Your brain knows. How's your ankle doing? Have you noticed the sound of this room? What's salient here, folks, is not that so much information goes to the brain. What's important for our purposes is that your brain is capable of ignoring it. And your brain has so much information in there that an enormous amount of neurological energy is devoted to the suppression of things that are irrelevant. If you've ever been in a room that had like buzzy fluorescent lights, and you're sitting in there and you're working, then they get turned off and you go, oh. That's the feeling that your brain no longer has to devote so much energy to the suppression of irrelevant stimuli. That's how much energy your brain puts into suppressing information. Because there's too much coming in, it wants to attend to only to that stuff which is adaptive, that's going to help you to survive. Memory works the same way. Thousands of things are pouring into your brain at any one moment. You know at this moment, for example, you may know where your keys. Do you know where your keys are right now, ma'am? No. Could you make a best guess? Where you could? Because you're on a vacation now. Your hotel room key.
Oh, my hotel room key? That I know.
You know where that is? Absolutely. And do you know, without looking, what shoes you're wearing today? Yes. Do you know what shoes you were wearing yesterday? No. No. Why not? Did you know yesterday? Could you? Usually. Can't say for sure. It's not, men typically don't know what shoes they're wearing today. It's just true. But women, well, men and women, you memorize the things. You know now, you have a memory of what shoes you're wearing. It makes no sense to remember what shoes you were wearing last Thursday. Who cares? You have it for a while, and your brain is in the business of not only suppressing sensory information, but suppressing irrelevant, unused, unnecessary memory information. Do you need something? Oh, okay, I'm just trying to, okay, cool. Very good. So your memory, the sensory system suppresses irrelevant information, and so too does your memory. And it's supposed to. That's the way memory is supposed to work. Forgetting is adaptive. It's the way you're supposed to work. If you failed to forget, you would have so much interfering information in your brain, you couldn't possibly figure out where your shoes are today because it would be all mixed up with the last 3 months of shoes, and you would have no way of retrieving it efficiently. Therefore, forgetting is an adaptive process that helps us to successfully participate. Here's the rub. The forgetting curve kicks in. This is the net result of it. This you see as the enemy. The brain sees that as a necessary and adaptive suppression process. That's Ebbinghaus. And it's the enormous, that is the success, that is a line of success for the brain. The key here, team, is the brain will continue to do this. It will continue to actively suppress information. The trick is for you to be able to signal the brain which is the important stuff and which is the stuff it's supposed to keep. And learning the tricks of how to signal the brain, your brain is more than willing to retain anything. It just needs you to tell it, this is important, keep this. And my core of my research explores what are those signals. How do you cue a human brain to say, in this rich body of information you've gotten, these are the things that matter to me. Please retain these for me. And that's what we focus on, is trying to figure out what are the secrets to it. Just, is there anybody here who has attended my brain seminar in the past? I get different. You have? When? Last year. Where? By any chance, see, that's interesting. Now, she's struggling. This is a long shot. This has not been set up. I gave them a list of 16 words. I told them don't bother to remember it. So, a singer, a color, a direction. Nope, that was south. Good, good, good. She got it. A television star. Bart Simpson. You knew it, didn't you? Now, this is a year, no practice, no intervening things. There were 16 items on the list. I bet we could get 7 or 8. An emotion. Jealousy. All right. But do you really? And you remember those too? Cool. Please. That's why I put the slides up. That's why I do a lot of seminars for companies, and we're doing one for Apple, and we're doing one for different small and big companies, a couple of hospital systems. I go and give lectures. How do you improve behavior and transfer? So if you're interested in that, let me know. I'd be happy to talk with you. But what's cool is I took the risk that somebody might be in the room to ask, and she did great. Because when you understand the ergonomics of the brain is absolutely willing to remember stuff. Just tell it to it in ways that it wants to, that it's made to work. If you provide knowledge to a brain in ways that are incompatible with the way it normally functions, it will forget it promptly. And then when that happens, what we do is we turn around and blame the learner. They're unmotivated. They lack commitment. They have an incentive entitlement. They're lazy. Their fault. No, we're not teaching in ways that are compatible with the ergonomics of the brain, and in turn we aren't reinforcing into the days and weeks after. We can't blame them. We're not teaching effectively. And when you find the tricks that can leverage the way the brain wants to operate, it's a piece of cake. It's like getting your kid to eat some food or something. If you just find the right incentives where they want to do it, life is so much easier if the kid wants to do what you want them to do. That's like the brain. It's so easy. If you teach things to the brain in the ways the brain wants to learn, you're going to have no problem. All right. So, what are these cues that help the brain, that make the brain remember things? There are a number of them, which I talk about in my longer seminar, but the single one that's most important, that for the purposes that we have here, training employees, the single thing that makes it most effective, that will give you the biggest bang for the buck, is use it or lose it. What the brain is doing is it says, okay, I just learned a phone number. Is this a phone number I need to keep? Okay, I've had a retrieve. I learned it today. I used it 15 minutes later. Should I keep that number? The brain, when you retrieve it, each time you retrieve a piece of information, you pull it out of your brain tags it and says, that's sort of a little bit more important. You brought that back. Maybe that's a relevant piece of information. And each time you bring back a chunk of information, the more likely it is you'll be able to bring it back again in the future. Simple as that. The more often you do it, each time you retrieve information, that information gets tagged as salient, and it is, in turn, more likely you're going to be able to retrieve that in the future. If that's true, got a question for you. There's an exam scheduled April 15th. On April 1st, you read the chapter. Okay? It's now April 14th. What should you do? What a lot of people say, what modally happens, what most students do, is they'll do something like reread the chapter. Turns out to provide almost no return on investment. And it's very important that you understand why that's the case. Because memory, you see, consists of two very distinctive processes. One process is the process of encoding. That's where you take knowledge from the world in a book, in an interactive e-learning exercise, in a lecture. You take the knowledge presented to you and you encode it. It's storing it in the brain. That's one process. The second process, which is a qualitatively different cognitive process, is retrieval, bringing it back out. So you encode it, you store it, terrific. Bringing it back out is a different metabolic process, and we need to treat them as separate. If the student simply rereads their chapter, they are re-encoding the same information. Does nothing for improving retrieval. It would be equivalent to saying if you are running a database and you're going to store some data in the database and you upload all your data, and then the day before you need it, you get nervous and you say, I think I'll upload it again. It's there. What you got to do is practice getting it out. You don't put in a redundant copy. Almost no return on investment. Versus, what you do is that you practice retrieving it. You simply ask yourself questions, and that process of soliciting questions and thinking about the answer, working, you get it right, you get it wrong, it almost doesn't matter. It is forcing your brain to rethink critical information, and that makes it more likely that information will be available to you later when you really need it. Now, so what should you do before the day before an exam? Reread the book, paraphrase the book, or take practice tests. It's not even close. This best, I don't know if I have Henry's picture up here. The answer is take practice tests. And yeah, good, Henry's up here. Henry is a hero of mine. Henry's at professor of psychology. I think he's at WashU in St. Louis. Henry's a fantastic researcher, and he has done unbelievable buckets of research. That's a fun article, the Berger article I've got down here, but I can give you lots and lots of sources. If you want to go back to your organization and say, we need to do after training, what are we doing? We're spending all our money on training. We're not doing anything after training. We need to do something. And you need evidence. I can provide all that kind of evidence for you. There's buckets of it that show the ROI on booster training. What you do in the days after training, I would argue, is more important than now. We're already pretty good at training. So now it's more important what you do after training. And if you want huge return on investment, i.e., you want your employees to remember something, reinforce it. So, yeah, I'm just going to have to skip. I just don't have the time. This is part of a longer talk. So what I'm going to do is just this. I'm going to skip through the details of the experiment to say this. What Henry did in this experiment was really cool. He said, now what's it take? What you're telling me I need to booster in the days and the weeks after training. How much does it take? What are the parameters? How should I do it? I'll address that in a minute. And how much time does it take? So Henry did an experiment. They asked people, you know the answer now, who was the second man on the moon? Buzz Aldrin. People couldn't remember it. It wasn't available to them. They didn't recall it. And he said, now how much boostering? They sort of knew it, but I wanted to booster that knowledge. How much boostering does it really take for them so that becomes a permanent available memory for them? How much does it take? And he did a parameter where he gave them a 30-minute exercise, he gave them a 3-minute exercise, he gave them a 30-second exercise, and a 5-second exercise, which was just mere exposure to the right answer. And then he compared probability of recall as a function of how much booster time was put in, reinforcement time. And to his surprise, and to the entire cognitive science community's surprise, it was 5 seconds. And it surprised us at first until we realized why. See, because the brain, when you get to 30 seconds or 3 minutes, you're re-encoding all the knowledge. You don't need to do that. All you need, a 5-second touch, where your brain goes in, grabs a piece of information, and brings it back out. That quick rehearsal is sufficient to produce all the return on the investment that you need to make the retrieval more likely. I'm blabbering a lot. Let me stop for questions. Look around for questions, 'cause I'm talking way too much here. Please, questions? Thank you.
It makes perfect sense to me in terms of going back and having that retrieval.
Uh-huh.
Now, in terms of that after training, I have a retrieval, and then I want to add an additional encode, something new.
Mm-hmm.
Has that been studied and how effective that is in terms of, let's say, for example, teaching everything at one day and then constantly asking for retrieval versus teaching this much one day, retrieval, encode, retrieval, encode, retrieval, encode?
Spaced is always better than massed practice. So spaced is better than massed. There are good parametric experiments telling us at what rate and so forth. The answer tends to be a function of the type of content you're teaching and the nature of the challenge. So there are parametric answers to those questions. All right, so booster training is the holy grail of memory. You guys, as being enrolled, presumably all of you who were able to get in have a badge. If you have a badge, we're working with Training Magazine, and you are going to be boosted. I think the email goes out tomorrow or Wednesday. And you're going to get an email that says, hey, Training Magazine wants to demonstrate the importance of after training. Would you like to participate? If so, and it'll give you the 5 keynotes. There's 3 regular keynotes and 2 morning ones. We'll give you a list of 5. You can check any one of those you want. When you do so, pick the ones you've attended. We will then send you boosters in the next days and weeks after training. And it's going to things like our happiness lecture this morning. We'll ask you some questions. And what's so cool about it, it will show up in your email client. So you get an email on your iPhone. And we have a thing going on leadership right now. So you'll get an email that's a booster learn on leadership. You click it, you open it. It says, according to our instructor, the first step in consensus leadership is A, B, C. My learner looks at it. Oh, that was B. Click B, right? Right away you get feedback. Yep, you're right, it was B. Or, no, the correct answer is C because of this and this and this. I got a 5 to 10 second interaction with that experience. The net effect is we help reinforce the person's learning of that topic, but it's a halo effect. And what you're doing is not just that specific information, but that entire lecture seminar, you're telling the brain, hey brain, that thing was important. You just pulled information back from it. Yes?
What does the research show about recognition and recall?
In terms of, in terms of, Henry's data comes back and shows us some recognition is where you see the correct answer in a multiple choice list. Recalls when you have to bring it back spontaneously. Depending on the context, sometimes recognition's better, sometimes recall's better. For purposes of boostering, you get so much by doing anything that fussing about the details you just get so much return on doing anything. It's so much better than nothing that, I'm happy. This is some of the stuff we research and we lecture about. It's how to optimize after training. But geez, do anything and you'll get enormous return. Now, okay, so let's do that. 3 critical benefits. This is the way you can use after training to be enormously beneficial. The first thing, there's 3 things that if you implement, and I'll show you different ways to implement programs of boostering. If you do so, the first benefit it brings is it reinforces the training. So you gave them a 1-hour lesson on leadership or whatever it is, you can reinforce it. They're going to be more likely to remember that. Great solution. A second thing, when you're using these boosters, is you can determine competence. Did they master this material? How many, because in ours we have a software solution that delivers this automatically and really inexpensively, but we can use it. You as the instructor can look at how many of your students got this question right or wrong. And you can determine not only their competence as learners, but your competence as a teacher. It works both ways. And so it's a wonderful assessment tool to give to the reports, and all of that allow you to assess both your learner and your teacher. The third one is the coolest. consider how nice this can be. For a big retailer, we will booster their learning. And one of the questions that goes out could be like this. Can you give me an example of how you have used this leadership lecture to improve your daily performance? Okay? So you got this thing on anger management. How does that anger management lesson help you become more effective on the job? That's a booster question. It goes out about 2 months afterwards. They've had time to process it. So the employee types in their answer. We get answers like this. You know, I was starting to get in an argument with a really grumpy customer, and then I remembered the course that you gave me, and I used the techniques, and I ended up selling them a big wash machine. Now, it's cool because that booster is reinforcing the training. They're more likely to remember the anger management training. It is also helping determine how well they comprehended it. But more than that, they're providing you with testimonials about the efficacy of the training that you gave them. Suddenly, you are collecting level 4 data, Kirkpatrick level 4 data, that you can take to the CFO and say, hey, listen, you want better training? Let me show you. Remember that meager budget you gave me? Here's what I'm doing. Here are changes in behavior that we can collect directly linked to the training we're providing. If we want bigger budgets, I mean, we all know this. I'm sure that there's probably a fair number of 125 folks in here. If you want bigger budgets, you must deliver evidence to your CFO that we're doing something effective, that we're changing behavior and it's benefiting the bottom line. And what you can do, you see, it's such a lovely opportunity. You're touching your learners. You're touching the learners in the days and weeks after training. And part of that touch is the solicitation of information that you can use as evidence of ROI. Comments or questions? Please, thank you.
Boostering, is there any research around what you choose to booster within the lesson and the sequence at which you go at it?
Yeah, and I'm just, the answer is yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, we have a process we have with our product. We have a whole series of videos that we have on how to author boosters, whether you use my product or anybody else's, or you can do it. You can do this. Those of you who are from a reasonably well-funded 125, there's a good commercial solution. On the other hand, if you're a small operation, I'm telling you, you can do this with Google Forms and Gmail. You just fill out a Google form and you fill in, names of the employees and author in the different row, different column, the questions. Gmail will go through Google Forms, pull out the names of your employees, and send them Gmail questions, and then report their answer back to you. It's arduous, but it works great. So you can, on a low budget, get an enormous return on investment. You simply have to interact with your learners in the hours and days after training. Yes?
How about how often how many times do you
Totally good question. So let me see what I'm just looking at my slides so I know what I'm going to ignore here. Okay, good. Question was, how often do you send them? We recommend a 2-day, 2-week, 2-month protocol. The 2-2-2 protocol is on day 2 or thereabout, maybe days 2 and 3, but early, right after training, we are going to send you recognition or a recall question, multiple choice question. According to the instructor, the best way to avoid a lawsuit on harassment would be ABC. Simple recognition task, so that's what you do on 2 days. And the goal there is just to get them to bring back that chunk of information. Simple recall. Day 2 weeks, I want a different kind of question. I want a generative question. So 2 days, the goal of the 2 days is just to get them to recall the information. And what happens, well, you'll understand this better if you came to the Wednesday talk. There's a spreading activation across the brain, and it's really beautiful the way we think it works neurologically. But at 2 weeks, I want generative. I don't want them just recognizing or recalling. I want them thinking of it. And so going back to my retailer example, they would be saying, how can you imagine using this? You're a new supervisor at this big retail outlet. How can you imagine using this consensus leadership on the floor? And you are allowing the person to think through it. They got to recall it. And then you got to think, how might I apply this? What an awesome opportunity. Then at 2 months, it's an integrative question where you're actually asking them for particular instances of how they have used this training and incorporated it and transferred it to the workplace. One of the things, the holy grail here, team, for those organizations who recognize a genuine value in maximizing learning, the other thing we recommend to you is put an incentive system in. If you can afford to incentivize your employees, give them $1 for getting an answer right, $1 credit on Amazon. It's little. It's great. People don't need a new car to participate in training. Give them $1. And people will have fun, and they'll pull out their iPhone, and they'll say, oh, consensus, it's B. Yeah, got $1. Cool. And they're into it. And all of a sudden, don't provide people with rewards or reinforcements for finishing your training. Because that just encourages nexting. Done. Because you can do the quiz at the end, you're almost certainly going to get it right? And then promptly forget it. That's the reality in which we are operating right now. It's next, and hope to God that the quiz question's easy enough that you can guess the answer, got that over with, checkbox, and forgotten. And then we blame them. What you do is if you're going to have an incentive system, you incentivize completion, successful completion of boostering, because that demonstrates long-term retention and application. And when you build your incentive structure, it doesn't have $1 to get a question right on Amazon, and just have an incentive system. We call it, it's a blue bucks we use, and we count them up, all their right answers, and the company will enjoy an enormous return on that investment. Questions? Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Things like that. Do you think that's as effective as giving them $1 if you in a competitive environment where there's leaderboards and points and badges?
Okay, to give you some of the background, I'm a student of a psychologist named B.F. Skinner. And what we studied in Skinner's lab is exactly how do you maximize behavior as a result of incentives. My sense is that the gamification stuff is inherently correct. My concern with gamification is that at times it becomes so cumbersome and it becomes such a behemoth system that the game is the thing and not the learning and not the object of the learning. And so while I think theoretically gamification is exactly the right idea, it becomes the tail wagging the dog. And so I'm concerned that we need to keep in mind what is our learning objective, what is our behavior transfer, and I think there can be a lighter touch of gamification. In some ways, giving $1 for getting a quiz question right is gamification, but it's just a whole heck of a lot simpler. So does that answer the question, sort of? Yeah, yes, please.
I think one of my questions would be like, say for example, with like a new employee orientation where you're doing a week or even a 16-week program, what would be something that you could utilize within the system? Because it seems like the examples you've given have been, there's 1 or 3 key points. What if there's 100 points that they're having to learn over a long period of time? What's the best way to utilize these systems within that sort of depth of knowledge?
My university students get this after every lecture. After every lecture I give.
Okay.
And it's cheap and it's easy and it's quick and it's non-aversive and they recognize very quickly how dramatically it improves their experience with it. And so the cool thing, just to show you that, okay, so this is something you'll get, and if we're going to booster, as I mentioned, all the keynotes, right? I'm also going to booster this. So if anybody is interested, just leave me a business card or a note. You can leave it for myself or Erica in the back on the camera, and give either one of us just a business card. And it would be nice if you're interested in something, just write on the card or write on a piece of paper your email address and what you're interested in knowing about. or if you want me to be a speaker, whatever you might, if you just write it on the piece of paper. We'll get back to you quickly. This is what it's going to look like. It comes in. You'll click on it. And so, again, I should have finished that sentence. I'm going to booster this session, not just the keynotes, but every lecture I give is boosted. And what's nice about it is, I will admit, I give this lecture fairly often. I wrote a booster program for it. 5 questions. I wrote 5 questions about this. And when I get back to the office, I'm in Portland, Oregon, I'll simply take the names of those people who came here today, add them to a list, put them on a CSV, put them in. Everything else is automated. Bam. You guys will get emails at just the right times, just the right kind of booster. It'll start with some multiple choice and recognition. There'll be a video thrown in, and you will get, the whole thing tracks out. When I give this lecture again, I'm going to a big hospital system in Michigan. I just add them they got this lecture, I simply add them to the program and they get boosted automatically. That's the system. That's the logic of the system. Author your booster program once, do it intelligently, systematically, and then every time that lesson is given in the future, send it out again. Does that make sense? Thank you.
On the 2-2 model,
Yes, sir.
on a simple we call generative question, is there a different one for the 2-month model?
I call it integrative. Integrative. So this is a typical quiz appears. It appears in your email, could be in your browser or on your cell phone. People make a response. They get instant feedback, right or wrong. And again, right or wrong is important, but it's more important, they're just interacting with the content. They're thinking about it. They're queuing up their brain. Fun. Ask them a poll question. What is the best way to motivate an underperforming employee? Oh, maybe B, gentle threats. That's their opinion. So it's not right or wrong, but what they can do, you see, then, is they can compare their answer to other people. Furthermore, they can sort by different demographics. This would be real data taken among all the people in your organization. They could see the different answers different people give. They can compare themselves to other people. And what's most important, they're thinking. They're thinking about your topic. And if you can get them to think about your topic, send them a darned YouTube video. Just record something else, just a slight elaboration. They'll get this as a booster. They click on it, bam, they watch a little 30-second video. You're going to get one from our guy. Erica earlier today recorded. Sean, was that his name? Sean was terrific. And we brought him into the little video studio we got set up, and we interviewed Sean for 60 seconds. He was brilliant and charismatic. You'll see that interview in a few days. As a result of that, you will remember the content of Sean's lecture more dramatically. It's a huge difference. It's a great return on investment. Booster learning, holy grail of memory. What you do after training is more important than what you do during training. Our commercial product, just to give a very short plug, is super duper easy to use. It costs about $10 per employee a year. If you got a significant number of employees, it's really inexpensive, and you get unlimited boostering with it. If you're interested in it, we have a booth. We're right across from the ballroom. So because we're doing all the boostering there, we're boostering the conference. So we got a big 20-foot booth across from the ballroom. You'll see us standing there in white shirts, and be happy to answer questions about the product. More importantly, if you have questions about the theory of it, I encourage you and welcome you to write to me, and I'd be glad. We have a whole science. By the way, if you're interested, the other part of what we do, we have created a neuroscience learning academy. And you'll see if you come on Wednesday, I do all kinds of demonstrations about how your brain works and memory things and all of that. So we are putting that into an institute where you come in and you can take classes online and so forth, and it's all free, but it's an opportunity for you to get to know the brain better. It's kind of a user's manual. All right, how much, am I out of time? Am I close?
4 o'clock.
What time do I have till? 15. Oh, I got 15 minutes? I could have slowed down. Yes, sir.
Is there any correlation to age? Is this as effective for children, teens, or is it predominantly
The best answer I can give is, unfortunately, Henry has not yet gone to do the parametric work across ages. He has mostly access to university students, so the best answer I can give is we don't know yet. And I think he clearly should be doing studies with children, because our K-12 system needs help. And so, but he has not done that work, and so my best answer is we don't know. I would hope so, I would think so, that it should work equally well across ages, but we don't have data. It would require a change in the nature. Yeah, some of his experiments could simply be done if he just used kids, and it just, to my knowledge, hasn't been done yet. Other questions? Yes?
Is there a saturation point? I mean, in a typical year, employee goes through tons of learning in various qualities and various topics. Is there a risk of them starting to not even notice the boosters coming in?
What was your first car?
1987 Toyota, no, 1974 Vega.
I had a Vega. Mine was white. I had a Vega. It's funny. The answer to the question, answering with that kind of a thing, what was your car? The brain retains so much that the true answer is we don't know if there's an upper limit. But we know it retains so tremendously much that if that should not be the limit. That's not the problem. I don't think we have reason to fear that our brain is going to fill up with training.
From a practical point of view, I mean, just as an employee experience, an employee gets 1 million emails a day, and all of a sudden they're also getting needs. Have you seen any fatigue?
That's one of the reasons that we go 2-2-2 and we don't say bunches and bunches and bunches, because you will burn them out. And so we touch only a few times. We will touch an average employee 4 times on a training, maybe 5, depending on how many we want to touch, because people will burn out. They'll stop being interested. Pardon me? But what I should have said, so at 2-2-2, the first 2, the multiple choice that I'm sending out, I could send out a couple of those. I could send one out on day 2 and one day 4. It's the early training as multiple choice recognition. So I could send out 2 or 3 at the beginning, and then the next chunk, 1 or 2. You don't want to fatigue people, especially if you're reinforcing a bunch of stuff. And so it is enormously effective. Keep it down to a 5-second interaction if you can, especially early. Until people, that's when you guys start getting your boosters for the keynotes, and for the other ones, we touch real fast. And just do it. Just respond to them. Indulge me. And watch how you'll remember. Watch how after a year, when I just read a list of 16 words, without provocation, the first thing you said was Elvis and yellow. Then you said north-south, and you got the second one right. A dinner food, a type of tree. Yes. It's stunning that if you teach effectively, and when I did her session, within session boostering, and you learn the tricks. You learn tricks about the ergonomics of the brain. And when you do that, and you do this internal boostering, people remember it without trying. And we do another demonstration at the beginning where I say, okay, memorize these 16 words. And people are horrible at it when they're trying to remember. But if you can find the tricks, people will remember for you. So I don't think the brain limit's is not a problem that we currently. One of my favorite, I just tell B.F. Skinner stories because he was a huge hero to me. Fred Skinner was asked at the time, do you think that racial differences observed, IQ differences observed between Asians, Caucasians, and African Americans are due to genetics? Asians score higher than Caucasians, African Americans scored lower. Is that genetic? They asked Fred Skinner. And it was a big, what's he going to say? And he gave this lovely answer. He says, I don't know. It could be. It is an empirical question. But we are doing so poorly teaching everybody that if we simply start incorporating our knowledge of learning and practice and boostering, everybody's going to get so much better that these little differences between races will be washed out and irrelevant. And it's so hard to me. I will always remember that as a huge contribution to my intellectual development and a commitment where you just want to shout from the rooftops, my God, we can be doing better. Teach the way the brain learns. Don't teach. It's like trying to, I never thought of this example before. It's like trying to teach a dog to roll over or fetch. You got to teach it the way the dog understands it, not the way you can't explain it to him. Or it's like we have Nike. Anybody or yes. So we're doing this for Nike, right? Awesome. I explained it to them, could not get them to understand the concept until I came up with the following metaphor. Okay, big basketball game next Sunday. Okay, we're going to be playing Syracuse, so we're going to play a zone defense against them, and we're going to do it. And I'm explain to my whole team, here's how we're going to play the zone defense. And then I say, great, guys, see you next week. Nobody would do that. What you do is you explain it to them, and then you go on the floor and you practice. And you practice, and you go through repetitions, and you retrieve that knowledge, you utilize that knowledge. Suddenly, that's how everybody understands that's how sports should work. Why don't we do the same thing in learning? No, we're just going to tell you. We'll just explain it to you, and then that's enough. And the brain doesn't work that way. We have to maximize. Yes, ma'am.
Put the practice in, people say the session was too long.
But
Could have been shorter if we hadn't had that damn practice.
if you hadn't had that I understand, and I'm sympathetic. So, if the practice is simply causing them to, you're restating the same bloody thing, they've already got it fully encoded, I got it. Okay, now, let's say it in different words. They're going to start resenting you for that. That's not your problem. I would argue just, keep your practice short and sweet. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. Other questions? Thank you.
I have a couple. Reading out loud
Yes.
and repetition, repeating what someone says, or you read something and read it out loud. Does that boost the memory?
Great question. Goes back to first, that was discovered by William James. 1880, he talked about that. And what James talked, it's so cool. He says, when I'm reading a book, okay, you read a passage, and you want to memorize it. How do you do it? You could take the book, and you could read the book, and then read it again. But he said it's more useful if you read the book once, and then you read and you close it, and you try really hard to retrieve it out of your brain. And if you miss it, you open the book, get a cue. That's inactive retrieval. So just rereading the book again passively is ineffective. Rereading it where you're actively closing it and trying to remember it's in there, that's useful. Does that answer the question? As James, 1880, it's forever ago, and we knew that, and we haven't begun to apply it. We are in that same booth, have a video studio set up. We are hungry for people to stop in and talk to us about success stories. We're back in the booth. We ask how many people are here with the top 125 group? A lot of you. So these people are part of really good groups. So we would encourage, if you saw a hand go up there, they're part of a really good organization. You may be as well, but they are. Come on in. If you come by the booth, when you walk past us, you'll see a booth there. If you have success stories about how you've taught leadership, if you have success stories of how you have your HR practices that have worked out really well for you, come on in and share them. We're going to be part of a whole training magazine collection of materials in a video. Yes, sir.
James' research was 1880. Ebbinghaus came out with the forgetting curve in 1885.
Mm-hmm.
And you just said a minute ago, we've known this James stuff since 1880 and haven't begun to apply it.
Right.
Same is basically true of Ebbinghaus. Why do you think that is? We've known it for 130 years, but we're still not. It hasn't become part of our lives yet. Until now, with technology. Why do you think it's taken this long?
It's like writing. We take the easy path, we take the easy way to write, and it turns out to be really hard reading. Easy reading is really hard writing. If you work your butt off to write a clear sentence, it's going to be clear and people are going to get it. I find that the kind of teaching that's ineffective is easier, the easy teaching, the stuff where you can stand up and hand it out and you don't have to work at it, and you don't have to think of mnemonics, and you don't have to booster it. It's not hard to take, come on, with all due respect to the kind of training you do, you get a concept, what do? You get a subject matter expert. She does a brain dump on an instructional designer who tries to get their head around it. They summarize it, put it on text, put it on a page with a next button, with a picture. That's training. And with all due respect to my good friends at Adobe, they make money on that. And they give us Captivate tool, which makes it incredibly easy to create content. And we don't learn from it. And I think the problem is that, and this is not meant disrespectfully, I hope, but it's easy to teach badly. And especially if there's no feedback system and all we have to do is blame the learner for not learning, it's easy. And I think the hard work is, it's an aerobic sport to teach well. And I don't think we're always willing, or we don't have the reinforcement systems in place to incentivize us to do well. That was a risky answer. I hope I didn't hurt feelings, but that would be my answer to it. Yes, ma'am.
You just told us that you didn't have time this time, because I was there at your one. Please don't ask me about that.
You were there?
You told us that you didn't have time to do the exercises because you only had an hour this time. So you have basically dropped the exercises for the lecture piece as well, and no disrespect.
Yeah. Well, no, but I'm doing the exercises on Wednesday, and so that was a strategic decision to try to allocate the things I'm doing. But I like being called on stuff.
What do you advise is the optimal role of the manager in the retrieval process?
There is a lot of concern, strategizing right now about getting the manager involved and having the manager then talk to employees about what did you learn last week, or I heard you attended this e-learning session or this lecture. What did you learn? Fantastic. It's a little bit like gamification because you got to get a whole bunch of moving parts working together. I think in theory it's terrific. The pragmatics, it's so much administration that it doesn't always happen in the way you want. So I'm all for it. I think anything which causes an employee to have retrieval opportunities is useful and effective. I find the technology solution is quick and simple. You get 90% of your return. Having the manager do it would get you 100. Manager doing it would be better, but can you effectively implement that in a big system? It's harder. So that would be the answer to the manager issue. I think it's great. There's no better way. Yes?
Doing both is too much?
No. I think it depends. I think you're only going to get that extra 10%. If you're boostering with quiz questions and these retrievals and integrative and interactive stuff, you get most of your return on investment. So the manager thing, I'm not sure, it would be, is it cost effective? How much it costs to implement that kind of a mechanism versus the additional return you get on your investment? It may or may not be worth your additional effort to engender that.
That it's the manager's job to develop those people and to help them learn and to bring them along.
100%. Are they doing it?
No.
And so what's the effort? What's the effort that's going to take to get that mechanism rolling? And it's just, I mean, we all know, especially those of you in big companies, how bloody hard it is to get big systems to move. And that's why we would recommend just find other simpler mechanisms. Don't gamify your whole training. It's just, it's really difficult. And it takes an extremely long time. And the return can be very good, but getting everybody on board may not be possible. Find another quick and dirty solution, you can get the return better. A couple more questions and we're done. Oh, a couple more questions, and then if you want to be boosted on this, I'm telling you right now, I hope this has been a good experience and you've enjoyed this lecture. In 1 hour, half of it is gone. By tomorrow, 70% of what I've said is gone. You can't let that happen to you. By the way, we've got a textbook publisher now, right? This is great. Textbook publisher, you buy a book, scan the QR code at the end of the chapter. How cool. right? You read a chapter, you scan the QR code, you get emails boosting your learning. How bloody cool. So the whole world should be that way. If you read something that you like, we're talking in Training Magazine, so that when you read an article in Training Magazine, scan the QR code, automatically you get boosted. How cool. So that's the kind of efficiencies that I think, rather than trying to change a whole managerial system, you get more efficiency by having a simple touch solution. And my good friend in the back is signaling me with power. There are other if you have questions, please, cards or a note to me. I'd be so happy to talk with people about the stuff. And we'll see you in the booth. Thank you.